The coffee that changed everything. The November morning air was sharp and restless, the kind that cut straight through thin jackets and reminded the city's working poor that winter was coming, whether they were ready or not. Naomi Washington pulled her coat tighter as she stepped out of the tall office building whose floors she had spent the last 8 hours scrubbing. The faded blue uniform she wore clung to her damp skin, still carrying the faint smell of bleach and detergent. At 28 years old, her body ached in ways that belonged to someone twice her age. Her knees cracked whenever she bent down too quickly. Her lower back throbbed whenever she carried the heavy trash bags from the corporate offices, and her hands were permanently marked with tiny scars from cleaning chemicals that had long since eaten away at her gloves. But Naomi did not complain. Complaints would not pay the bills, and she had a younger brother who depended on her strength. Jordan was 16, quiet, and far too grown for his age. Their parents had died within 3 years of each other, first their father from an accident at a construction site, then their mother from a sudden illness that left behind nothing but hospital debt and 2 children to figure out life alone. Naomi had dropped out of community college to take on cleaning jobs, sacrificing her own future so her brother could at least finish high school. Every day she worked herself to exhaustion, and every night she promised herself that Jordan would never feel the shame of standing in front of classmates with shoes too worn, or going to bed hungry because she couldn't afford groceries. This morning, as she checked her phone, the time glared back at her. 5:30 a.m. Jordan would be up soon, and she'd need to hurry home to prepare his breakfast before school. Their kitchen cupboard held little more than stale cereal and a carton of milk that was 2 days past its expiration date, but Jordan never complained. He always smiled, always said thank you, always reminded her that she was doing enough. That only made the guilt heavier in her chest. Naomi pulled a few crumpled bills and coins from her pocket as she walked. $3.72. That was her Friday ritual. Once a week, she allowed herself one small luxury, a single black coffee from Gilded Grounds, the upscale café 2 blocks away from her job. Most days she couldn't justify spending money on something so unnecessary when every cent mattered. But Fridays were different. Fridays, she permitted herself 15 minutes in a warm café, sipping coffee that didn't taste like burned water, pretending she belonged among the business suits and handbags. It wasn't much, but it kept her spirit from breaking. When she pushed open the café door, a soft bell chimed overhead, and warmth enveloped her. The rich aroma of roasted beans drifted through the air, mingling with the low murmur of morning chatter and the hiss of the espresso machine. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching on polished marble counters and golden accents that made the place look more like a boutique hotel lobby than a coffee shop. Naomi inhaled deeply, letting herself enjoy the atmosphere, even though she knew she was invisible here. The line was already forming. Men and women in tailored suits checked their watches impatiently, clutching leather briefcases and designer purses. Naomi slipped quietly to the back, her eyes fixed on the glowing menu board even though she already knew what she would order. A small black coffee, $3.25 with tax. That left just enough change for the tip jar, a habit she never broke because she knew what it was like to rely on the kindness of strangers. That was when she noticed him. At first glance, he looked worse off than she did. Much worse. His clothes were ragged and frayed at the edges, his shoes scuffed and nearly falling apart. His gray hair was unkempt, his beard thick and untrimmed, and his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of the world pressed down on him. He stood 2 people ahead in line, keeping his eyes low, shuffling awkwardly as though he didn't belong in the bright, gleaming café. The other customers seemed to notice him instantly. A woman in a sharp blazer wrinkled her nose and took a half-step back. A young man in an expensive coat pretended to scroll through his phone but was really avoiding eye contact. When the man reached the counter, the barista's expression shifted. Her polite customer service smile faded into a tight line, and her tone grew clipped. "That'll be $12.50, she said when he asked for a medium coffee and a blueberry muffin. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a credit card. The edges were worn, the plastic bent from overuse. The barista swiped it quickly, then frowned. She tried again, slower this time, as though making a performance out of it. The machine beeped in refusal. "I'm sorry, sir," she announced, her voice carrying loudly across the café. "Your card has been declined." The room quieted. Conversation stilled. Every pair of eyes turned toward the shabby man. Naomi felt her stomach twist. She knew what it was like to be humiliated publicly, to feel as though the entire world was laughing at you for daring to exist where you didn't belong. "Could you try again?" the man asked softly, his voice trembling with embarrassment. The barista swiped again. Another beep. "Declined," she repeated, louder this time. "Do you have another form of payment?" The man searched his pockets, but they came up empty. His shoulders sank lower. Someone behind Naomi Chu chuckled cruelly, and another whispered something sharp about these people. Heat rose in Naomi's chest, anger stirring, not at the man, but at the way others looked at him, as though poverty were contagious. "I'm sorry," the man said quietly, beginning to step aside. "I didn't realize." Before she fully knew what she was doing, Naomi stepped forward. "I'll pay for it," she said, her voice firm, despite the nervous flutter in her chest. She placed her crumpled bills on the counter. Coffee and muffin. For him. The cafe went silent again, but this silence was different. The barista stared at her as though she had spoken in a foreign language. The man turned toward her, his eyes wide with disbelief. They were striking eyes, sharp and intelligent, though dulled by exhaustion. "I couldn't possibly accept," he began, his voice a mixture of surprise and protest. "It's just coffee," Naomi interrupted gently. "Everyone deserves breakfast." Her words hung in the air, simple but undeniable. She gestured toward the register. "Could you add a small black coffee to that order too? I'll pay for both." The barista looked down at the money, calculating quickly. "Ma'am, that's not enough for both." Naomi bit her lip. She had miscalculated. Her chest tightened. She dug into her pocket again, pulling out 2 quarters she had forgotten about. Still not enough. The barista shook her head impatiently. The man looked ready to protest again, but Naomi raised her hand to stop him. "Then just his order," she said firmly. "I'll skip mine today." The transaction went through in awkward silence. The barista slid the coffee and muffin across the counter, her expression unreadable. Naomi stepped back, feeling dozens of eyes still fixed on her. The wealthy patrons whispered to one another, their voices dripping with judgment or confusion. But Naomi ignored them. She had seen enough cruelty in the world to know kindness often came at a price. The man accepted his coffee and muffin with trembling hands, as though holding treasures. His eyes locked onto Naomi's once more, and she saw something flicker there. Not pity, not embarrassment, but something else, something deeper. Bewilderment. "Why?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the cafe. Naomi shrugged, already stepping away. "Because I know what it's like to not have much. Sometimes the world needs a little kindness, you know?" She offered him a small smile. She turned to leave, ignoring the stares and whispers. At the door, she glanced back one last time. The man was still standing there, frozen in place, holding his coffee like he had forgotten what to do with it. She gave him a nod. "Enjoy your breakfast," she said quietly, then stepped out into the cold morning air. What Naomi could never have imagined was that her small act of kindness, a decision made in an instant, would ripple through her life in ways she could not begin to comprehend. Because the man she had just helped was not what he seemed. Beneath the ragged clothes and the weary posture hid William Whitaker, one of the most influential and secretive billionaires in New York City. And Naomi Washington, the exhausted cleaner who had nothing left to give, had just shown him a kind of wealth money could never buy. A stranger who wasn't what he seemed. The city was already alive by the time Naomi made it home. Delivery trucks rumbled along the narrow streets, honking impatiently as they swerved around taxis. Commuters in pressed suits rushed toward the subway entrance, with coffee cups clutched like lifelines, their conversations a blur of meetings, deadlines, and investments. Naomi didn't hear any of it. She walked quickly, her head bowed against the cold, her heart still echoing with the awkward silence of the café. Why had she done it? Why had she stepped in for a man? She didn't even know. It wasn't the first time Naomi had given away what little she had. If a coworker forgot lunch, she split her sandwich. If someone on the subway asked for spare change, she often handed over the coins that were supposed to go in her laundry jar. But today felt different. There had been something in that man's eyes, an emptiness that mirrored her own, and yet behind it, a sharpness, like he was carrying secrets too heavy for words. By the time she reached the worn brick building she and Jordan called home, she had convinced herself to forget the whole thing. People came and went in New York all the time. She would never see him again. He was just another passing story in a city full of them. Jordan was already awake when she pushed the door open. Their tiny apartment smelled faintly of dust and detergent, the peeling wallpaper a reminder of promises their landlord never kept. The boy looked up from the kitchen table, where a textbook lay open. His dark curls were messy, and his t-shirt had a hole at the collar, but his smile was warm when he saw her. "You're back early," he said, stretching. "Shift ended on time," Naomi replied, dropping her bag onto the floor. She pulled open the cupboard, reaching for the cereal box. There wasn't much left. She poured the stale flakes into 2 chipped bowls and added the last of the milk. It was thin and sour, but she said nothing. Neither did Jordan. As they ate, she studied him. 16 years old, yet already carrying himself like a man. He should have been worried about basketball games or dances, not bills and groceries. The guilt rose in her chest again. She forced a smile. "I'll pick up another shift tonight. Maybe we can get real food for the weekend." Jordan didn't argue. He never did. He simply nodded, as though it was normal for a teenager to accept sacrifice as part of daily life. That hurt Naomi more than anything. Meanwhile, across the city, the man from the café sat in the back of a sleek black car, sipping slowly at the same coffee Naomi had bought him. The muffin, untouched, rested in his lap. His driver, a quiet man named Carl, who had worked for him for over a decade, watched in the rearview mirror, but said nothing. He had learned long ago not to ask questions when his employer slipped away for his tests. William Whitaker removed the ragged coat he had worn and folded it neatly beside him. Beneath the disguise, his posture shifted, no longer hunched, no longer timid, but commanding. His gray eyes sharpened as though a mask had been lifted. In the business world, William was a ghost in plain sight, one of the wealthiest CEOs in the country, yet rarely photographed, rarely interviewed, deliberately avoiding the spotlight. He believed power came not from attention, but from observation. He often dressed down, blending with the poor, watching how people behaved when they thought no one of value was watching. But that morning, something had shaken him. He had expected cruelty. He always did. It was how he measured the world. He watched how people treated those they believed were beneath them. And time after time, he saw the same disdain, the same dismissal. But Naomi Washington had broken the pattern. She had nothing, and yet she gave anyway. Not for recognition, not for gain, but because she believed kindness mattered. "Sir," Carl finally said, his voice cautious, "shall I take you to the office?" William didn't answer immediately. He stared at the city skyline rushing past, the towers of glass and steel that he technically owned pieces of, but that meant nothing in moments like this. "No," he said at last. "Not today." Carl glanced at him again, but didn't question. The car turned in another direction. Back in Naomi's world, the day unfolded with its usual rhythm of exhaustion. She cleaned 2 more offices before noon, her knees aching worse with every staircase. She ate nothing but an apple she had stuffed into her bag the night before, saving what little food they had left for Jordan. At times, she caught herself thinking of the man in the café. Had he eaten the muffin? Had he felt embarrassed all day? She pushed the thoughts aside. She couldn't afford to dwell on strangers. That evening, after Jordan had finished his homework and gone to bed, Naomi sat by the window, staring at the city lights. For a moment, she let herself imagine a different life. What if she had finished college? What if she had a real job, one that paid enough to live without counting every coin? She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her, when a knock startled her from her thoughts. It was unusual for anyone to visit them. The neighbors kept to themselves, and the landlord only came by when he wanted rent. Naomi hesitated, then opened the door cautiously. A man stood there, not the shabby figure from the café, but clean-shaven, dressed in a tailored coat, his hair neat. But the eyes, those sharp gray eyes, she recognized instantly. "You," Naomi whispered, stunned. William gave a faint smile. "Me." He held up a small bag from a nearby diner. "I thought you might not have had dinner." Naomi blinked, uncertain. Her instinct was to close the door. Strangers didn't just appear at her apartment with food. But something in his gaze stopped her. It wasn't pity. It was curiosity, as though he was trying to solve a puzzle. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "Why are you here?" William considered his words. He couldn't tell her the truth, not yet, that he was a billionaire whose identity she would find plastered across financial magazines if she searched. That he had been testing humanity, and she had passed in ways no one else had. Instead, he said simply, "Because you helped me this morning when no one else would, and I don't like leaving debts unpaid." Naomi's pride bristled. "You don't owe me anything. It was just coffee." "Maybe to you," William replied softly, "but to me it was more." He extended the bag again. "Please, take it." Naomi hesitated, then reluctantly accepted. Inside were 2 hot meals, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, far more than she could have afforded. Her stomach tightened painfully with hunger, but she forced herself to remain guarded. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice quiet. For a moment, they stood in silence, 2 people from opposite worlds connected by something neither of them fully understood yet. Naomi did not invite him in. William did not ask, but as he turned to leave, he paused. "What's your name?" he asked. "Naomi," she replied. He nodded. "Naomi, I'm William." She didn't know it yet, but that night marked the true beginning of a story that would test both of them. For Naomi, it would be a journey through doubt, hope, and the kind of choices that changed destinies. For William, it would mean facing the emptiness his billions could never fill. As the door closed behind him, Naomi leaned against it, clutching the warm bag of food. She didn't know who William really was. She didn't know why he had chosen her, of all people, to repay a kindness. But something in her heart told her their lives were now intertwined, and nothing, not money, not pride, not the judgments of the world, would ever be the same again. Whispers of truth, the weekend stretched out with its usual exhaustion. For Naomi, Saturdays were supposed to mean rest, but the rent was due in less than 2 weeks, and the landlord had already left another note taped to their door, a reminder written in bold red marker, "Pay or vacate." She picked up 2 back-to-back cleaning shifts, scrubbing grime from stairwells and polishing the glass doors of apartment buildings she would never afford to live in. Jordan spent most of the day at the library. Naomi insisted he stay focused on his schoolwork, though she knew he sometimes used the quiet there to escape the constant weight of poverty pressing in on their small apartment. When she finally returned home Saturday evening, her hands blistered and her muscles aching, she found a surprise waiting outside her door. A bag, neatly placed, tied with string. Inside were groceries, fresh bread, fruit, cartons of milk, packages of meat, even a jar of honey. Her heart skipped. She froze in the doorway, scanning the dim hallway. No note, no explanation, only one possibility came to mind. William. But how would he know where she lived? The thought made her chest tighten. She wanted to feel grateful, but instead she felt exposed. In her world, strangers did not simply show up with gifts. without wanting something in return. "Naomi?" Jordan called from inside, curious. She forced a smile as she carried the bag in. "A neighbor left it," she lied. She couldn't bring herself to explain, not until she understood what William truly wanted. That night, as she lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, Naomi's mind raced. His words echoed. "I don't like leaving debts unpaid, but what kind of man considered a coffee debt worth bags of food?" Something didn't add up. Across the city, in a glass tower overlooking the skyline, William Whitaker sat alone in his penthouse office. The disguise of rags lay discarded in a box nearby, his crisp shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows as he sifted through reports. But his mind was not on the documents. It was on Naomi Washington. For years, William had tested people. Disguised as a drifter, he moved through cafes, hotels, even subway stations, observing the way strangers treated him when they believed he was worthless. It was his way of staying connected to reality, to the truth money often hid. Most people failed. Some ignored him, some mocked him. But Naomi had stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. And she hadn't done it for recognition. She hadn't known who he was. That purity of heart unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. For a man who owned empires, who could bend politicians and markets with a single word, he had never once felt powerless, until a cleaner in a faded uniform had offered him her last few dollars. By Monday, Naomi had almost convinced herself it was all coincidence. Maybe the groceries came from a church program. Maybe William was gone from her life as quickly as he had appeared. But fate had other plans. She arrived at her evening job, an upscale corporate office where she scrubbed the marble floors after executives had gone home, only to find him there. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks. But no, there he was, standing in the lobby, speaking with the building manager. He wore another tailored coat, his posture confident, his presence commanding. He looked like he belonged in this world, while she was just the shadow sweeping up after it. When his gaze caught hers, he excused himself and walked over. "Naomi," he greeted softly, as though her name had weight on his tongue. She tightened her grip on the mop. "What are you doing here?" "I own part of this building," he said casually, as if mentioning the weather. "Came to check on renovations." Her chest tightened. Own part of this building. The words didn't make sense. The man she had seen in rags couldn't be the same man who spoke of owning skyscrapers, and yet his eyes told her otherwise. She stepped back. "Why are you following me?" "I'm not," William replied calmly. "I'm trying to understand you." Naomi bristled. "There's nothing to understand. I'm just a cleaner who happened to buy you a coffee, that's all." "That's not all," he countered. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "Do you have any idea how rare that kind of kindness is in this city, in this world?" Her throat tightened, but she looked away. Kindness doesn't pay the rent. Something flickered in his expression, pain, perhaps, or guilt. Before he could respond, her supervisor entered the lobby, and Naomi quickly turned back to her work, ending the conversation. But William did not leave. He stayed long enough to watch her scrub the marble until her arms shook, his eyes following her every move, before finally slipping away. That night Naomi tossed in bed, restless. Who was he? Why couldn't he just let it go? She wasn't some charity case. She didn't want pity from a man who clearly lived in a different world. And yet, why did she feel something else when he looked at her? Not pity, not judgment, something she couldn't name. The answer began to reveal itself 2 days later. It was Jordan who noticed first. He had come home from school buzzing with excitement. "Naomi, guess what?" he said, waving a folded magazine. "There was this article in the library about some billionaire who keeps his face out of the news. They call him the invisible tycoon. Hardly any photos exist, but look." He opened the page, pointing to a grainy image taken years before. The face was younger, the beard trimmed, the hair shorter, but the eyes, the same piercing gray, were unmistakable. Naomi's breath caught. "Where did you find this?" "In a business magazine," Jordan said, shrugging. "His name is William Whitaker. Owns like half the city. They say no one really knows what he does with his time." "Isn't it wild?" Naomi sank onto a chair, the blood draining from her face. William Whitaker, billionaire, owner of skyscrapers, the same man she had seen shuffling in rags, card declined at a café counter, the same man who had brought food to her door. Her world tilted, the floor shifting beneath her. She had helped a billionaire. No, more than that. She had treated him like an equal when everyone else had treated him like dirt. And now he had sought her out, crossing lines she didn't understand. The revelation left her shaken. But beneath the shock was something else, something deeper. Fear. Because if William Whitaker really was who he seemed, then her life, her quiet, fragile, carefully balanced life, was about to be pulled into a storm she could not control. The cost of kindness. For the next few days, Naomi tried to pretend nothing had changed. She scrubbed office floors, polished lobby glass, and gathered trash bags with the same weary rhythm. But the truth burned at the back of her mind like a stubborn flame. Every time she saw a businessman in a tailored coat, every time a magazine headline caught her eye, she thought of him, William Whitaker, the invisible tycoon. She couldn't tell Jordan. Not yet. He was too young, too hopeful. If he knew the man who had shown up at their door was one of the most powerful billionaires in the country, he might start dreaming of miracles. And Naomi had learned long ago not to believe in miracles. They only left you broken when they didn't come true. But fate had a way of refusing silence. It was Thursday evening when William appeared again, this time outside the laundromat where Naomi washed their clothes once a week. She was folding Jordan's school shirts, the fabric thin from years of wear, when she felt his presence before she even looked up. "Naomi," he said softly. She spun, her heart leaping into her throat. He wasn't in rags this time, nor in a crisp business suit. Instead, he wore a simple sweater and jeans, clothes chosen to blend in but still marked by their quality. Even dressed down, he radiated something she couldn't name, authority perhaps, or gravity. Her guard shot up instantly. "You can't keep following me." "I'm not following," William replied calmly, hands in his pockets. "I'm searching." "For what?" she demanded. "For the reason someone like you exists," he answered without hesitation. His gaze was steady, unnerving. "In all my years, in all my wealth, I've met very few who would give without expecting something back. And yet you, someone with almost nothing, gave everything you had to a stranger. Why?" Naomi's throat tightened. Anger sparked in her chest. "Why?" she echoed, her voice low but sharp. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing. Because I know what it's like to be humiliated, to be judged. Because I promised myself I would never let another person feel invisible if I could help it." Her voice cracked. She hadn't meant to reveal so much, but the words tore out like a wound. "Do you want me to say I regret it?" "I don't. But don't come here pretending you understand my life. You don't. You live in a world where money solves everything. Mine is a world where no one even bothers to look at you unless you're holding a mop." For a moment, William said nothing. Then quietly, "You're wrong. Money doesn't solve everything. If it did, I wouldn't be standing here." Naomi froze, startled by the rawness in his tone. His gray eyes held something deeper than she had expected. Loneliness, perhaps, or hunger of another kind. For all his wealth, he looked like a man starved of something far greater than food. Before she could respond, Jordan burst into the laundromat, grinning with his usual boyish energy. "Naomi, you won't believe what I—" He stopped when he saw William, his smile fading into curiosity. "Who's this?" Naomi hesitated. She wanted to say, "No one," to push William away before he could entangle them further, but William crouched slightly, meeting Jordan's eyes. "My name's William," he said. "Your sister once did me a kindness I'll never forget." Jordan blinked. Really? He glanced at Naomi, who looked tense. Then he looked back at William. That sounds like her. She does that a lot. Something in William's expression softened. He studied the boy, the oversized backpack hanging from his shoulders, the worn sneakers with soles beginning to peel. For the first time, William understood the full weight Naomi carried. She wasn't just surviving for herself. She was carrying her brother's future on her shoulders. Later that evening, as they walked home, Naomi scolded Jordan gently. You shouldn't talk so much to strangers. Jordan shrugged. He didn't seem like a stranger. He seemed interested in us. That's the problem, Naomi muttered under her breath. But that night she couldn't sleep. She replayed the conversation again and again. William Whitaker was a billionaire. He could have dismissed her as a charity case, thrown money at her, and walked away. But he hadn't. He kept returning, not with pity, but with questions, and Naomi wasn't sure if that frightened her more than it moved her. The following week, she got her answer. It was late, close to midnight, when she stepped out of one of her jobs, her body aching with fatigue. The streets were quieter, shadows stretching long across the sidewalks. She pulled her jacket tighter, quickening her pace, when a sleek black car rolled to a stop beside her. The window lowered. William's face appeared in the glow of the street lights. Naomi, he called. She froze. What are you doing here? I've been waiting. His tone was calm, almost solemn. Please get in. I want to show you something. Her instincts screamed against it, but something in his voice, in his steady gaze, tugged at her. Against her better judgment, she slid into the back seat. The car moved smoothly through the city until it reached a towering building of glass and steel. William led her inside, past a lobby that gleamed with chandeliers and polished marble, into a private elevator that carried them to the top floor. When the doors opened, Naomi stepped into a penthouse office that felt like another world, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, shelves lined with leather-bound books, paintings worth more than she would make in a lifetime. She turned to him, wide-eyed. Why am I here? William studied her quietly. Then he said the words that would change everything. Because I want you to know the truth. I am William Whitaker, and the morning you bought me that coffee, I wasn't just a man with a declined card. I was a man searching for proof that kindness still exists in this world. You gave me that proof, and I can't let it go. Naomi's breath caught. Hearing it aloud, undeniable, made her knees weak. She sank into a chair, clutching the armrest as though it might anchor her. You're insane, she whispered. Why me? There are millions of people in this city. Why me? Because no one else did what you did, William replied firmly. Not one person. And that tells me something about you, Naomi. You see people others ignore. You value things money can't buy. I need someone like that in my life. Not as an employee, not as a project, as something more. The room fell silent. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest. Part of her wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as some twisted game of the rich. But another part, the part that remembered the way his eyes had looked in the café, broken yet sharp, knew he meant every word. Still, fear clawed at her. I don't want your money. I don't want to be part of your world. William stepped closer, his voice low. I'm not offering money. I'm offering honesty. Something I rarely give anyone. You don't have to trust me now. But know this. The day you handed me that coffee, you changed my life. Whether you like it or not, our stories are bound together. Naomi stared at him, her breath uneven. She wanted to tell him to stop, to walk away, to never come back. But deep inside, something whispered that her life had already shifted course, that she was standing at the edge of a choice that would define everything that came next. The weight of worth. Naomi did not sleep that night. After leaving William's penthouse, she walked home through the cold streets with her jacket pulled tight, her mind churning like a storm. His words repeated in her head. The day you handed me that coffee, you changed my life." She wanted to dismiss it, to laugh at the absurdity. A billionaire, changed by a cleaner's $3? It sounded like a fairy tale, and she had never believed in fairy tales. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw his expression, earnest, raw, unguarded. Not the mask of wealth or power, but the face of a man starved of something money could never buy. When she opened the apartment door, Jordan was still awake, hunched over his homework at the table. He looked up with sleepy eyes. "Where were you? I was worried." Naomi hesitated. She wanted to shield him, but the truth was already spilling into their lives like light through a crack in the wall. She sank into the chair opposite him, rubbing her temples. "Jordan, you remember that man from the laundromat? William?" Her brother nodded slowly. She exhaled. "He's not who we thought. He's William Whitaker, the billionaire." The silence stretched. Jordan blinked, then leaned back. For a moment he seemed stunned, but then a small smile tugged at his lips. "I knew there was something about it. It's the way he looked at you. It wasn't like most people. He paid attention." Naomi frowned. "You're not shocked?" "Of course I am," Jordan said quickly. "But think about it. Out of everyone he could know, he chose you. Isn't that kind of amazing?" Naomi's throat tightened. "Or dangerous." But Jordan shook his head. "Naomi, all my life you've told me not to judge people by what they wear, or how much money they have. You said what matters is who they are when no one's watching. That's exactly what you saw in him, isn't it? Before you knew who he was." The words hit her harder than she expected. For years she had carried Jordan on her shoulders, protecting him, guiding him. But now, in his quiet way, he was guiding her. The next week unfolded like a test she wasn't prepared for. William didn't flood her with gifts or promises. He didn't try to buy her affection. Instead, he showed up. Not every day, not in overwhelming ways, but enough. A warm meal left outside their door, a ride home when the nights grew too cold. A single note slipped under her mop bucket one evening. "You are seen." Naomi fought it every step of the way. Pride was a stubborn shield, and fear whispered that the higher she let herself climb, the harder the fall would be. Yet little by little, William's presence eroded the walls she had built. One evening, he invited both Naomi and Jordan to dinner, not at a glittering restaurant, but at a small family-owned diner tucked in a quiet corner of the city. Over plates of roast chicken and mashed potatoes, William listened, truly listened. He asked Jordan about his dreams, about college, about what he wanted to become. And when Jordan's eyes lit up talking about engineering, William didn't smile politely and change the subject, as so many adults did. He leaned forward, engaged, and said, "If that's what you want, then we'll find a way to make it happen." Naomi's chest ached. No one had ever spoken to her brother like that, with certainty, with belief. But the real turning point came a week later. Naomi's boss at one of her cleaning jobs berated her for missing a spot on the marble lobby floor. He didn't lower his voice. He scolded her in front of the staff, mocking her uniform, sneering at her worth. She kept her head down, swallowing the humiliation, the way she always did. But when she walked outside, William was waiting by the curb. He had seen everything. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched at his sides. "You don't deserve that," he said sharply. Naomi gave a bitter laugh. "It's just how the world works." "Not my world," William replied. His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before, protective, almost furious. "No one speaks to you like that again. Do you hear me?" She stared at him, stunned. For once she didn't see the billionaire or the stranger. She saw a man who couldn't stand to watch her be diminished, and something inside her cracked. That night, as they walked by the river under the glow of the city lights, Naomi finally spoke the truth she had buried deep. "I'm scared, William. Scared that if I let you in, everything will collapse. That you'll get bored, or decide I don't fit in your world. I can't afford to dream. Not when my brother depends on me." William stopped walking. He turned to her, his eyes fierce and steady. "Naomi, I have built empires. I have negotiated with governments. I have made decisions that shook markets. But nothing has mattered as much as the morning you handed me that coffee. You showed me a kind of wealth I've never known. If you think I could ever walk away from that, then you don't know me at all." Her breath caught. For the first time she believed him. The weeks that followed were not easy. The world noticed. Paparazzi began to circle, curious about the mysterious woman seen with the reclusive billionaire. Naomi faced whispers, judgment, and doubt. But through it all, William stood by her. Not as a savior, not as a benefactor, but as an equal. And slowly, Naomi began to stand taller too. She stopped apologizing for taking up space. She stopped hiding her voice. She realized that kindness, the thing she had always given so freely, was not weakness. It was power. Months later, as spring warmed the city, Naomi stood in the very same café where it all began. This time, she wasn't in her faded uniform. She wore a simple dress William had given her, though she had chosen it herself. Jordan sat at a corner table grinning proudly, and William stood beside her, his hand lightly brushing hers. The barista who had once humiliated William looked up, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. But William didn't gloat. He didn't mention the billions behind his name. He simply ordered 2 coffees and a muffin, turning to Naomi with a smile. "This place will always remind me of you," he said quietly. Naomi smiled back, her heart full. "Not because of the coffee," she teased. "No," William agreed, "because of the kindness." And in that moment, surrounded by the murmurs of strangers, Naomi realized something profound. Her worth had never been measured in dollars or uniforms. It had always been in the way she chose to see others, even when the world looked away. She had once believed miracles didn't exist. But as William's hand found hers, as Jordan laughed from across the cafe, as the weight of years of struggle lifted just enough for her to breathe, Naomi realized she had been wrong. Sometimes miracles weren't grand gestures or sudden fortunes. Sometimes they were as small and as simple as a coffee placed on a counter, given with love, at the exact moment it was needed most. And that small act had changed everything.